Do you guys know how you go to plant a vanilla orchid and wind up making a whole jungle? There was an unused corner in my zoo that bothered me. And I already had some potted plants, so I decided to make a vanilla orchid tree. Now, it started off with a liner. This is not a pond liner. They sell these at Home Depot and Lowe's as pond liners. It's just not that. But it will suffice for a good basin to hold the moisture that's going to come from my plants. So I edged it up and I started making a border. This border, as you'll notice, had many iterations, but really at the heart of it is a bunch of different sized rocks. No matter what, if you're making a pond or something like this, you want interest. So you want different sized things to make that interest happen. So you'll notice I have small rocks, big rocks, boulders, and then I have the gravel in the middle. Simple. Now, the tree was challenging, more challenging than I thought it was going to be. So I bought a bunch of different pieces of cork bark and I started piecing it together. Now, the trunk was easy, right? The biggest pieces form the trunk. So I grate stuffed them together, let them dry. I let a day between each one. So I glued the first one, flipped it over, glued the second one. These are days and days and days of work. Then I started building out the branches. The first branches are thicker, so that's a thicker piece going to the left, and I glued that one. I wanted a smaller one. Really, I needed that curve. You see how that branch curves to the right? So I wanted to make this the crux for one of my plants that you'll see later, but it would have been nice if it was thicker. The hardest part about gluing this stuff is getting it to stay, so you have to find various things to prop it up while you glue and let it dry. Again, the thicker pieces are super easy though, so it dried like nothing. These smaller branches, I regret putting both of them in because it kind of looks too symmetrical. I didn't want to tear it off later on, I could have, so I kept them, but if I would have gone back and done it again, that one that I'm putting there on the left, I wouldn't have done that. Now, this is not necessary. I put a screen down on the drainage hole and I put some drainage leca on top of that. Not a necessary step. I'm not even sure it does anything. I just figured, hey, I don't want a bunch of dirt or sediment going into my basin, so I did a little bit extra. Now, this is called an aeroid mix. So for orchids, you don't want soil. You want this aeroid mix, which is basically bark, charcoal, perlite, sphagnum moss, things that drain well and retain humidity. So I put my tree in and I put a rock underneath it to hold it in place. And then I backfilled because I needed this thing to be not immobile. As you can see, it shakes, but pretty much immobile. And then I started trimming off the foam and hiding it. I hid it with a combination. So these top pieces I used super glue and dirt and super glue and moss. And the reason why I did this is because I just needed a base layer of camouflage. And I normally would use silicone, but to be honest with you, I didn't have it and I wanted to keep going. So I used super glue, which worked actually pretty well. And I wound up going back and using more foam and hiding it with sphagnum moss later, which you'll see, but this base layer really serves a purpose. Now, all the plants on my tree are epiphytes. So you really just need some sphagnum moss, and this fern right here has already rooted. It's been 2 weeks since I planted that. It's already rooted. You can't pull it up without pulling the roots up, which is really cool. So then after that, I went back and I hid some more with the moss and the super glue, and so you couldn't see any of the joints. That was the biggest part. Once that was there and ready to go, I filled the basin up with gravel. That's just river rock I got at Home Depot, but I top it off with a really beautiful rock later on, which you'll see. But I wanted to get the pot in there because I wanted the pot to be covered up in camouflage as well. So I didn't put it all in at once and then put the pot on. That's a mistake. You put a base layer down, then you go back and do it again. Now, the orchid came halfway through this build, and I was excited because I wanted to get it right in. It looked good. Fast Growing Trees is a great company, not sponsored by them, but I've never had a problem with them. I plant my entire outside garden with Fast Growing Trees, basically. We have a new house, and all their trees are great. And this orchid, once I unsnip the bindings, came with 2 other pieces that I'm going to propagate. So that's that long one, there's another shorter one, and I backfilled with sphagnum moss, and then topped it off with some more aroid mix. So I'm hoping this drains well and keeps the orchid healthy. Once the orchid was in, this is the beautiful rock I'm talking about. I think it's called El Dorado, also at Home Depot. You go to Home Depot, if you build ponds or if you build anything like this, El Dorado is awesome. So, once I had that orchid in and I had my bird's nest fern there, I wanted to keep going. This was not planned. I just wanted to keep going. So I kept adding branches to my tree, and I backfilled all the holes with sphagnum moss. And I did this because I wanted to keep planting plants. I actually envision this now to be almost a whole ecosystem. If I can get springtails to live within my tree and not jump around and die, right? If they're self-contained in this open tree, that would be awesome. I don't know if I can do it, or even if I'll try. Right now, I just want the plants to live, so I'm not going to try yet. But imagine this tree being its own self-contained ecosystem like in a rainforest. That would be pretty cool. So right now you're seeing my vanilla orchid going up. My bird's nest fern is the crux of the tree. I have this huge open hole here, so I decided I'm going to put a bromeliad in there. And they're selling bromeliads at Lowe's. I just picked one up. I picked up a giant one. I put dirt in there at first, stuffed it with sphagnum moss, and I waited. I had a very small hole on this side, which I didn't know what to put in there at first. So I found this other plant. I didn't even know what it was, but I knew it would grow up epiphytically because it looks like the bird's nest fern and a bromeliad combined, basically. And usually if it look alike, play alike. So I put that in there. And then I put this peacock moss on top. But then I realized peacock moss doesn't want full sun, like full bright sun. They want indirect sun. So I had to go back and change that. But this bromeliad here in the corner actually looks pretty rad, and I think that one will do well. Not changing that at all. And I had one more hole to fill, so I stuffed it with sphagnum moss and didn't even have a plan for that yet. I wound up buying this plant. I forget what it's even called. Tell me in the notes if you remember this, or I'll post it. But it's supposed to vine down. It's almost like a succulent. So we'll see what happens with that. But I had extra peacock moss there that I put down below. I had some other plants laying around that I left below. There's my bird's nest fern. There's my bromeliad. But wait for it. Wait for it. I changed it. I put that plant, that other hybrid plant up top, and then peacock moss I spread throughout the whole tree. So now you're gonna see a little bit of interest going around, and not just random plants. It actually is cohesive in the environment.